And really, the
Yeah.
whole point of a system is to keep the salesperson in there prospecting, lead follow up, going on appointments, negotiating. That was drilled into my head from the beginning. Like, Aaron cannot get into my stuff. Most salespeople are not really well equipped to be good at systems. They're always like, oh, I hate systems, they're the worst. And that's because you're not supposed to be doing them. You're supposed to hire someone who is passionate about that.
If you want to stay married, we need to like figure this out. You alluded to the fact that, you know, I remember like kind of from a training perspective, it was more like, this listing needs to be inputted, like go figure that out. And I remember
Yeah.
being in a tiny room with you. It was maybe like 100 square feet. There was no like windows, and my back would be to you, and I'd be prospecting, and you would be behind me, like trying to figure out how to input listings and all that stuff. So, um, as far as like those systems are concerned, you mentioned that you were trying to do them all yourself, which brings up two things for me. One is that agents try to do that while simultaneously trying to like list and sell property, which is virtually impossible. And then you like at that time you were the system. So for people that are listening, they need to understand that like you were doing transaction coordination, scheduling showings, taking pictures, putting lock boxes out, putting signs out, like listing. You were doing all of that. Is that right?
Yeah, and answering the phone. So after I would be out on the field, I would have to come back to the office and there'd be 20 messages on agents asking me like, what are the HOA dues? And stuff that's not even important. So yeah, I was doing a lot.
Yeah, you're doing all of that. And that was in many ways like a superpower. It's what allowed us to go from 0 to 105 years, because we clearly separated those two pieces, and we had two people that were very capable in those two areas. So we could just I could focus on PLAN, prospect, lead, follow up, go on appointments, negotiate deals, and you're like this beast as far as systems are concerned, and we were able to do that. And then what I'm aware of is we also began to hit a ceiling, because what happened, as you were describing that, it made me reflect on it, is that me and you can only do so much as an individual. So you began to notice, even though you're super capable and you could do all of those jobs that people try to separate and have a bunch of people do, you were doing them all yourself. But around like 100 transactions, I remember you looked at me and you were like, babe, like, if you want to stay married, we need to like figure this out. And I'm like, okay. So
Yeah.
like, what was that awareness for you? And then like, what did you do to deal with that?
Well, the awareness was that it sucked. Like it's not fun. It leads to burnout, because one person's not going to be able to do all those jobs well. So then you start to see all the cracks. You start to hear the complaints. Oh, you didn't get back to me soon enough. Oh, I need this. You're just spread really thin. So I think, I mean, it also coincided with the birth of our first child. It's like once that happened, I was like, okay, this is the sign. We need to delegate. And that's when we got our transaction coordinator. And she's been with us for 12 years now. And that was a huge difference. Just that. I mean, she does it 10 times better than I could have ever done it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it came in stages, right? I think part of that was that initial bootstrap stage where like we weren't kind of paying anybody to do stuff. It was just me and you, and we kept it real lean and mean. And then as time progressed, and it's like, wait a minute, like there's only so much of us, and if we want to have other areas in our life from a personal perspective, and it started with transaction coordination, and then it continued with listing coordination. Like talk a little bit about, so once we hired a transaction coordinator, and you had already created, we were talking about this yesterday on a walk, it's like you already created like a checklist, and now the terminology that is in vogue and sexy is an SOP. So you had already had a checklist for transaction coordination, and we could just kind of plug and play and be like, hey, this is the way that we do transaction coordination, and that person was very capable and they can just take it over. So talk about how you did the same thing with listing coordination.
Well, I did it with every aspect of the business has like a workflow. So there's like a sales workflow, there's a listing workflow, there's a pending workflow, and then there's a customer service workflow. They all have different tasks that need to be done. And once you kind of write them out, that's where your checklists come from. And you can kind of assign each one to a person and give that person that checklist. So that's basically what I did with the listing coordinator is she came into the office and I told her all of the things that are, part of this role. And she honestly made the checklist better because she's a capable person. And that's one of the main things of delegating is to make sure that you have a capable person that can take it and make it better.
Yeah, it's like the difference between cul-de-sac talent and capacity talent. So I remember on our journey, we hired cul-de-sac talent, and like we had
Yeah,
to tell them exactly what to do and how to do it. And if we didn't, it wouldn't get done. Yeah. And those people lasted a very short amount of time. And then once we got capacity talent, it's people that you can truly delegate to and really like let go. So letting go of something is different. Like taking my hands off something is different than taking my eyes off something. So we still keep our eye on it, and we're getting updates from the transaction coordinator. Once it used to be back in the day, like an Excel spreadsheet where she's letting us know what's going on with all the files on a weekly basis. But we took our hands off it, but not our eyes off of it. So we're still paying attention to it. And then with the listing
exactly.
coordination, you started to do the same thing, which is where we were talking about this on the walk as well. Like if our bodies are the hardware, our brains are the software. So it's like I have particular software in my brain around systems for sales, and you have these SOPs in your brain or software around operations. And the problem is for most people, those systems are in their head. And the reason why that's a problem is because they have to be there to run the system. They are the system versus
Right.
getting it out of their head onto a checklist or an SOP. That way somebody else can run it. And then the game is finding somebody that's capable. Is that right?
Correct. And really,
Yeah.
the whole point of a system is to keep the salesperson in there prospecting, lead follow up, going on appointments, negotiating. That was drilled into my head from the beginning. Like, Aaron cannot get into my stuff. He's not supposed to be in any of the admin stuff. I would always yell at you, like, what are you doing? Go away. Go do what you're supposed to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. If I would sit down in your chair, you'd be like, bro, like, what are you like? Get out of here. Like, you're not supposed to be looking at emails. You're not supposed to be looking at files. It's not your job. So talk a little bit about that because I feel like, again, like for some reason, the operation side of thing is not perceived as sexy. What I'm also aware of is that like it's a very specialized skill. And when people think real estate, they're just thinking like, oh, I got to sell it. It's like not necessarily. Like if you have a brain for operations like you do and for systems and processes and procedures, like you geek out on that stuff. Like you light up and it's right in your wheelhouse. Like talk a little bit about why it's important for that role, the operations manager or these people that are on a team to understand that their whole job is to keep the salesperson in production, to keep them in, prospect lead follow up, go on appointments, negotiate deals.
Yeah, well, I think most salespeople are not really well equipped to be good at systems. And there's really no point in getting more and more and more sales if you can't service them because your customers are going to be angry. They're going to give you bad reviews. They're not going to give you referrals. So it makes sense to spend time and money hiring the right people to grow your business. Like you're just going to hit a ceiling if all you're focused on is sales. And I think there's two camps. There's the salesperson who wants to do everything and they botch up the whole operation side, or there's a salesperson who doesn't even pay attention to operations. So I feel like the right way to do it is to find the people who are actually capable and passionate about systems, because for us it's like a joy. And for most salespeople, when I say like, "Oh, I really love systems," they're always like, "Oh, I hate systems; they're the worst." And that's because you're not supposed to be doing them. You're supposed to hire someone who is passionate about that.